Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I am going to be recommending you 5 more non-fantasy books to read if you like grimdark. Now I did another video, a part 1 of this, and I was recommending 5 classics. I am just going to call it 5 non-fantasy books because some of these I don't know if you could necessarily classify them as classics. Without further ado, let's jump in. So the first book that I'm going to recommend is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. I read this at the tail end of last year and it is a book that I still can't stop thinking about. It is about a woman where she travels back in time to a period where her ancestors were enslaved. And it is very emotional, it is very raw, it is very gritty. It's not one for the faint of heart and it is quite graphic, but it is a book that is tackling some very heavy themes in a very beautifully written way, but in an almost quite emotionless way as well. I really like the way that Butler tells the story because, as I said, it is quite detached, and so it's almost quite a factual way of telling the story, if that makes sense. I loved it. It is a book that I still think about. It is a book that still upsets me to this day, but then there are glimmers of hope in the book as well that kind of showcase how even when we are presented with the worst of humanity, we still try to grasp the bits that make us ultimately human. If you do like grimdark, and I would to some degree classify this as a grimdark book, but I've never ever seen anyone call it a grimdark book, so I'm not going to go and fully commit to that statement. But if you do like grimdark, then I think this is a book that you would find very thought-provoking. The next book on my list is The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. Now, this is a book that I read recently. This is a book that I have never read, which I cannot believe. I never studied it in school and I never picked it up after the fact. It's one of my brother's favourite books. I love reading the favourite books of people that I, love and care about, and he's been wanting me to read it for a while, so I thought, why not, let's pick it up. So when I ended up reading the book, I loved it. I fell in love with the way that Mark Twain tells his stories. I read another Mark Twain book last year, which I really enjoyed, and this one had a lot of the same hallmarks in how he tells a story. It feels very personal, it feels almost quite intimate, it feels like we are on the journey with the characters. And the thing about The Adventures of Tom Sawyer is that it might not seem like it would appeal necessarily to people who like grimdark, but there's quite a lot of heavy thematic work that is happening under the surface. I would say, themes of like race and the place of women. There's also themes of kind of like how we handle loss, how we handle relationships with family and friends and other people, and there's just a lot. This is a true coming of age story, but as I said, there's a lot of undercurrents that are happening below the surface that I think give it an extra bit of spice that I think grimdark readers would really enjoy. The next one on my list is Butcher's Crossing by John Williams. I had a review of this come out semi-recently. It is a book that I absolutely adored, and it is a book that I still continue to think about this day. It is a story about a young man who is trying to discover himself. I feel like a lot of grimdark books, at least for me, they really help me understand my own limitations, my values, why I do things the way I do them, because a lot of these characters often tend to be quite flawed. And I would say all the characters of Butcher's Crossing are quite flawed. They're quite interesting, complex individuals. They're very multi-layered. And I would definitely say that is true of the main character of Butcher's Crossing, even though he is a young man. He is really trying to figure out who he is with all this kind of other stuff that's happening on in the background. If you really like vivid, unfiltered, raw looks at life, then this is a really good one because it strips that all back and it lays it all there for you to see as the reader. The next book on my list is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. Now, this is a classic, and I read this one last year, and it's another one that I haven't stopped thinking about because, my gosh, is there a lot happening, again, kind of under the surface. This book covers a lot of different things, from race, slavery, women, to the kind of idea of the American dream and American capitalism, and being able to be your own person and not be beholden to the man. And I just think it's a really wonderful story of friendship as well, but also betrayal. It's very, again, raw, very unfiltered. You'll see a lot of common themes amongst these 5 books that I picked. They tend to show humanity at its worst, but at the same time, there's glimmers of hope. There's glimmers of, oh, this is also just very human, and as much as there is horror in humanity, there's also a lot of beauty in humanity. And I think Of Mice and Men captures that really well. Steinbeck is also a really beautiful writer. He's one of my favourite authors. I just think he has a real way with words and a real way of getting very stark realities across to the reader, which I really value, and I don't really think we get that a lot, especially in modern writers. But look, I think if you're looking for somebody who represents the painstaking reality of life, John Steinbeck is one of my go-tos for that. And I think, honestly, you could read any of his books and you probably get that, but Of Mice and Men is the one that I've read recently, so I'm recommending that one. Next on my list, we have French Exit by Patrick DeWitt. This is a book that I read last year as well, and I've almost read all of Patrick DeWitt's books now. I think I've only got one more left, but he's a phenomenal writer. He writes a lot about the human experience. He writes about flawed characters who are trying to figure out their way. And French Exit is exactly that. They're not very likable, the two main characters that we follow, but you know, they're human as well, and they have their own struggles. They have their own inner battles that we might not necessarily be aware of, but they are battling through every single day. And even though these people aren't necessarily likable, we do still feel a sense of empathy towards them, because for one reason or another, they're not very satisfied with the way that their life is. And I think everyone, to some degree, can probably empathize with that. And I think in that way, they inherently become somewhat relatable. And similar to the other authors that I've already mentioned on this list, DeWitt has this wonderful ability to, you know, kind of paint these very obvious pictures, but then also implement these kind of little details that are really telling us what the story is about. And I really love that. I really love nuance in my books. DeWitt is definitely one of those writers. He's a very nuanced writer, but then I would say that's true for all of these guys. So that's it. Those are 5 quick recommendations on what to read if you like grimdark. Some of these you could actually classify as grimdark in one way or another, but just not grimdark fantasy, obviously, because there are no fantastical elements apart from Kindred. But even then, I wouldn't call it a grimdark necessarily. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you down in the comments. Thanks for watching, folks. Stay safe, take care, and I will speak to you soon. Bye.